The iPad Pro is my computer. It's a flexible device that fits any situation I need. Its display is crisp enough to edit high-resolution photos. It's powerful enough to handle multiple streams of 4K video. It's a focus device where I can write. It's a computer I can run my business from. It's the device I read books and articles on. It's the portable machine I can play games anywhere from. But this is the new 2024 iPad Pro. It comes with the new M4 chip, OLED display, completely redesigned internals, a keyboard that adds function and feel, plus a new Apple Pencil Pro that brings killer haptics and useful features. And I've been using it all. This video is sponsored by Paperlike. I have here the 13-inch iPad Pro. This one right here is the 2TB with the standard OLED display, and I have a 1TB with the nano textured display as well. This new iPad Pro has been completely redesigned internally, making for the thinnest Apple product Apple has ever made. The 13-inch model is only 5.1 millimeters thick and weighs only 1.28 pounds, while the 11-inch model is only 5.3 millimeters thick and weighs less than a pound. The first thing I noticed when I picked it up was how much lighter it felt. It's really only a quarter of a pound different from the previous generation 12.9-inch iPad Pro, but as somebody that used that device every single day, the weight difference is noticeable. For any device of this size, any weight loss will make the device more comfortable to hold for a long period of time. Now, it being lighter made me use the 13-inch model in tablet mode, just like this, a lot more. While I did that a bit with the old 12.9-inch iPad Pro, I wouldn't sit there and hold it, especially in portrait mode like this. I would put it in landscape mode, I'd put my legs up, rested on my legs or something like that, but I wouldn't just sit there and hold it. And the other night I was sitting on the couch and I was just reading articles on this thing like this. I'm confident that the weight loss is directly contributing to the fact that when I'm not working anymore, if I'm just like goofing around on the internet, reading Mastodon threads or articles or playing games or whatever, I'm just taking it out of the Magic Keyboard and I'm holding it like a tablet now, which is not something I would do for a long period of time with the previous generation 12.9-inch iPad Pro. These new iPad Pros come in two colors, silver and space black. The silver looks pretty much just like the standard silver that's, kind of been on iPads for a while now, but the space black is significantly darker than the previous generation space gray. One part of the internal redesign isn't necessarily just making it lighter, but they also improve the cooling system. Apple claims that the cooling efficiency is now about 20% better than the previous generation. In fact, one of the really nice touches that I love, the nerd in me just loves this, is actually the Apple logo on the back. On the inside of the iPad, it's actually copper now to help with the cooling system. Now, the reason why cooling systems are so important, especially on devices like these that don't have fans, is because of lithium-ion batteries. For those that aren't aware, the more a lithium-ion battery heats up and stays hot over a long period of time, the more damage is going to be done to it. So the worse the battery health will get, which means your battery won't last as long. So having a good cooling system in devices like these is really important. Unfortunately, improvements to the cooling system and how it directly affects the battery health is not something I can test in a week. That's how long I've had these devices. That's something that's going to take months and months, so it's something I'll keep an eye on over time. Speaking of battery life, this is the thing I am the most disappointed about with these new iPad Pros. It's still getting the same quote from Apple, all day, 10 hours of battery life. Typically for me, I get about halfway through my working day and then need to charge the device up again, and then that'll get me through the rest of my working day. Now, we'll need time to do full battery tests. It's hard to do a battery test on Apple devices within the first week or so of setting it up because it's indexing photos and files for search, and it's doing a lot of other background tasks that are indexing. So there's a lot of things happening on the chip that wouldn't necessarily be happening in normal use cases, and it's stuff that does eat up quite a bit of battery life. So it's really not fair to do a battery life test within the first week, so that's something I will be doing later on. But even compared to modern MacBook Airs, if these did get 10 hours of battery life, that would still be disappointing because those MacBook Airs seem like they just go forever. They're the Energizer Bunny of the Apple lineup, and I would love to see the iPad get that as well. Now, other than the weight, the thing you are going to notice right off the bat is the OLED panel. The OLED display in this iPad Pro is just absolutely stunning. It's amazing. Apple has branded it as the Ultra Retina XDR. I guarantee that is the only time I remember that. Now, for the first time in a long time, both iPad Pro sizes, the 11-inch and the 13-inch, have feature parity across the display, which is really nice. I'm glad to see that the 11-inch is being treated as equal. The only difference between the two is the physical size of the display. Now, what I find fascinating, in order for Apple to get a OLED display of this size, quality, and brightness, they actually had to take two OLED panels and put them together in tandem. The way this works is they took two different OLED panels and the M4 display engine and made it calibrate the two different panels and have them work together to display this image. With this iPad Pro, the display can reach 1,000 nits of sustained brightness, compared to the previous 12.9-inch iPad Pro, which got 600 nits. This new one is very bright. For HDR content, it can reach 1600 nits for peak brightness. This is for stuff like bright lights or the sun in videos or photos. With this display, you're going to be getting noticeably better highlights and shadows. The blacks are just pure black, just like you would expect from any high-end OLED panel. In fact, I started switching over all of my apps to the pure black dark mode options if they have it, instead of just the dark gray, because it just looks so much better. There's also no bleeding, especially if you have like a black background and white text on it. You don't see bleeding or ghosting or any of that. I watched parts of Blade Runner 2049, Dune, Avatar: Way of the Water, and an episode of Tales of the Empire on it, and it was stunning. This really makes me want Apple to make a TV. It would be a gajillion dollars, but it would be the best looking TV out there. There's no clipping with HDR, and it just looks stunning. I even just get caught up looking at my wallpaper background on the home screen. I use photos I've taken and I've never seen them look this good. Putting the M2 iPad Pro, the one with the mini LED display, next to the M4 iPad Pro with its OLED panel makes the M2 one look almost muted a bit. Now, this isn't a case of Apple just bumping up the saturation. These panels are incredibly color accurate, but they're just so much crisper. The contrast ratio has jumped from the previous generation of 1,000,000:1 to now being 2,000,000:1. Plus, with the two tandem OLED panels, you're getting brighter, more vibrant displays. Now, one really nice touch about these OLED panels is they can actually clock down to 10 Hertz. They still go all the way up to 120 Hertz, but for when you have like a static image on your iPad, they can clock down to 10 Hertz so that it doesn't refresh the display as often, helping with battery life. Now, with typical OLED screens, burn-in is something you need to be concerned about. But just like with the iPhone, the iPad was engineered around that. They use special algorithms with the M4 display engine that checks individual pixels and monitors for stuff like burn-in. If it starts to detect, then it will adjust those pixels to prevent that. This video is sponsored by Paperlike. Paperlike is one of my favorite iPad accessories. This is a matte screen protector that gives you a textured feeling for when you're using the Apple Pencil. Paperlike uses proprietary nano dot technology. This is engineered to add resistance and improve feedback when using the Apple Pencil over the out-of-box experience. This gives you more of a pencil and paper feeling when using your Apple Pencil. Paperlike is a matte screen protector, so it reduces the glare from either lights or the sun on your screen. Now, this is similar to the nano texture option for the new iPad Pros, but it's not limited to the high-end iPad Pros, the 1 or 2 terabyte models. You can apply it to any iPad in the lineup. Plus, you get that paper-like feel when using the Apple Pencil, which the nano texture does not give you. I have Paperlikes on both of my personal iPads. The new version of Paperlike, version 2.1, focuses on improving clarity of the display and does a great job at that. Now, Paperlike sells a ton of different accessories you can use with your iPad, like a cleaning solution and a magnetic Folio case. I'm going to put some links in the description below to where you can go check out Paperlike. My thanks to them for sponsoring this video. Now, on the 1 and 2 terabyte iPad Pro, both the 11 and 13 inch, there is now a new display option for nano texture. The glass of this is chemically treated to give it an anti-glare feature. The purpose of this is for you to be able to work outside in direct sunlight or have big bright lights shining on your iPad, and this dispels the light from actually being displayed. I tested it against the regular OLED display with my big studio filming lights, and it did a great job. On the regular OLED iPad, I saw the lights mirrored in the display, but on the nano textured one, it deflected the light. Now, what's even more impressive is when touching the display, it just feels like a normal iPad's display. On Apple's monitors that have similar anti-glare technology, you can't actually touch the display because it's etched into it, so you really don't want to touch it. This just feels like a normal iPad display. I did get a bunch of questions on when using the Apple Pencil, does it have that paper-like feel that you would get from the screen protector? No, it does not. It just feels like a normal iPad display. This is really just for anti-glare, anti-light reflection. But all that being said, I don't think this is an automatic upgrade for everyone. Under normal conditions, the regular OLED display just looks better. The nano texture option definitely has a more matte look to it, while the regular display looks bright and shiny. The other issue is you have to use a special cleaning cloth in order to clean the nano texture display. Apple does include one of these in the box. You don't want to just go out and use a regular microfiber cloth. And a good note is that the regular OLED iPad does not come with a cleaning cloth. If you work outside a lot, have lights shining directly on your display, or if you're like me and use big studio lights to film or take photos of your device, this is an upgrade you should consider. For everyone else that's not in that, you're not really missing out on anything. Like I said, under normal conditions, I think the regular OLED display looks much better. But for me personally, I like to work outside, plus I have these big lights, and when I put my camera in this top-down rig that's just right up here, you can see lights reflect in the iPad display every once in a while, and I have to work around that. With the nano texture display, I don't see that, so it would just make my life a lot easier. These new iPad Pros are the first computers to ship with Apple's new M4 chip. They're built on second generation 3nm technology, and the whole purpose of these is to be more power efficient. Apple's claim is that these new iPads with the M4 chip are 50% faster than the M2 chip iPad Pros, which was the last iPad Pro. Now, with the M4 chip, there is a bit of a configuration difference that you can get. If you are getting a 256 or 512 gig iPad Pro, you are getting 8 gigs of RAM, which was kind of the same with the last generation of iPads, but you're actually getting a binned chip. You're getting a 9-core CPU. It has 3 performance cores and 6 efficiency cores. And if you're getting a 1TB or 2TB iPad Pro, you're getting 16 gigs of RAM, which is similar to the last generation, but you're getting the full chip. So you're getting a 10-core chip, which has 4 performance cores and 6 efficiency cores. For those that don't know, the quick TLDR on what a bin chip is basically when CPUs are being made, sometimes a core comes out and it's just not working. Instead of throwing that chip out, which would not be very efficient, they use that chip and it's just a bin chip. So technically that core is there, it just doesn't work. I highly doubt most people will notice the difference of the binned chip on the lower storage tier iPad Pros. The only way I think you would really notice it is if you were doing like 3D modeling of incredibly large objects with a ton of polygons, or if you were editing like a ton of streams of 4K or even 8K video. That's really the only way I think you would notice it. If you're just using this to watch YouTube or play some games on or something like that, I doubt you're going to notice it. These chips also have a 10-core GPU as well, and for the first time they enable ray tracing for games, so that'll be really exciting to kind of dive into. The memory bandwidth also got upgraded on the M4 chip. It's now 120 gigabits a second, as opposed to 100 gigabits a second for the M2 and M3 chip as well. Now, again, this is going to be one of those things, I don't think for most people they're ever going to notice the difference. I think the only way somebody's going to really be able to take advantage of that extra 20 gigabits per second for memory bandwidth is if you're working on like large individual files, like large 3D objects and stuff like that. I even think for me, for like video editing and stuff like that, I don't think I would even notice the difference just for memory bandwidth. Now, I did run some Geekbench tests, and I know some people feel they're a bit arbitrary. I think it's a nice way of seeing like how these chips rank up against each other, especially now that the Macs and the iPads are on Apple's own M series silicon. We can kind of see how they stack up against each other. So for the M4 single core, it got a Geekbench score of 3,764. And for the record, the M2 chip got a score of 2,540. And the M3, which was never in an iPad, but I took the Mac average, and that averaged around 3,050. But where things get really impressive is when we look at multi-core. Multi-core, yeah. So the Geekbench score for the multi-core, and again, I have the 2 terabyte one, so that means I have the full 10-core CPU on this iPad Pro here. The M4 scored 14,722. For comparison, the M2 iPad Pro scored 9,632, and the M3 in the Mac scored 11,693. And for a little bit of comparison, that puts the M4, the base M4 in the iPad Pro to actually be faster than the M2 Max chip in a MacBook Pro. It actually even gets close to the M2 Max chip score in the Mac Studio, which is very impressive because I had a review unit, one of those, and that thing was fast. So if we take the Geekbench scores, do a little bit of simple math, it actually does look like the M4 chip is 50% more powerful than the M2 chip. Now, I did a Final Cut Pro export test, but there's a new version of Final Cut version 2.0 coming out, and that's the one that's going to be optimized for the M4 chip. So the current version is not optimized for the M4 chip at all. So this test really isn't that relevant, but I figured I'd share what I found with you anyways. But just keep in mind there is a new version coming that'll be optimized for this chip. So I took a 10-minute and 7-second video. It was all shot on the Canon R5, H.265 footage, multiple streams of 4K in the timeline, 10-bit C-Log3 with color grade for all the clips. The M2 iPad Pro exported that in 7 minutes and 25 seconds. The M4 iPad Pro exported that in 7 minutes flat. So really not that big of a jump between the two. I'm curious to see what happens when that version 2.0 of Final Cut Pro comes out. If there is a big difference, if there's a subtle difference, I'm going to keep this project around and re-export it when that update comes out and just kind of see how much optimization makes a difference. Now, I have seen a lot of people be like, stop making the iPad faster. The iPad it doesn't need to be faster. It needs to be focused on the OS. And while I agree, there is definitely some stuff in the OS that needs to be optimized. Like the number one thing, like right off the top of my head, Stage Manager. Get rid of the 4-app window limit. The Mac doesn't have it. The iPad shouldn't have it either. But the iPad getting faster and faster every year is what gets us pro apps. And not just Apple's first-party pro apps like Final Cut or Logic, but stuff like Shaper, Nomad Sculpt, and SketchUp for 3D modeling, stuff like Lightroom's ability to do subject detection and object removal, Pixelmator Photo and its ability to do ML photo editing, Camo Studio for doing multicam live streaming, Procreate for advanced drawing, adding that 16 gigs of RAM gave it the ability to add more layers for artists. And then there's Procreate Dreams, which is a really powerful animation app. There is a lot out there that can take advantage of the power of the iPad. But yes, I do agree, the OS needs to step it up a notch. An interesting change to these new iPad Pros is the camera array. The front-facing camera is no longer on the top edge, the short portrait edge. It is now on the long landscape edge. Now, this is still the same camera sensor and lens and Face ID sensor up here, but it's just been moved to a much better spot. The funny thing is, this is actually the thing that's taking me the most to get used to because I've been using the iPad Pro for so long. Every time I go to trigger Face ID or I have a video call, I look to the left and I'm like, oh wait, it's not there anymore. It's up here. Now when having a video call, I'm looking at the person. I'm no longer looking over to the left side to make sure I'm, having eye contact with the camera, which makes it look like I'm having eye contact with them. Or if you were doing the egregious thing where you were looking at the person on the iPad, but because it was so off from the camera, it looked like you were kind of looking away and not paying attention. Now, if you're looking at the person, you're looking at the camera. The issue is, though, is just this form factor. It really has nothing to do with the iPad, but this form factor in general. Laptops, other tablets, all have this issue. When the iPad is in the Magic Keyboard, it's sitting low and angling up, and that is not a flattering angle for anyone. There's nobody on the planet that looks good from that angle. Center Stage helps with this a bit, but it's still not perfect. Honestly, if I'm gonna have a video call, I'm gonna put my iPad on a stand and prop it up. The other change to the camera is the back camera array. There is no ultra wide lens anymore. There is just one camera lens, and it's the standard wide lens. Personally, I actually don't see this much as a loss. That ultra wide lens was never that great, and it was outside of testing. I don't think I ever used it for anything. I don't take photos with my iPad already, but on top of that, the ultra wide lens isn't the best quality. But it is always a bummer when a product had a feature and a new version comes out and it removes a feature. That is a bummer, because I'm sure there's somebody out there that was using the ultra wide lens on the iPad Pro. But if they're able to use this space for something better, then I'll take it, because I don't know anyone that actually used that. The other change to this camera array is the flash. It's now using the adaptive flash system. What's really interesting about this is Apple didn't pitch this for like taking photos at night or in the dark or anything like that. The way they pitch this is for scanning documents. And for me personally, that's actually what I use the camera array on the iPad Pro for the most. I don't take photos with it. I use it to scan documents. So what this adaptive flash system will do is, if you are casting a shadow onto the document when you go to scan it, it will balance that shadow out, add light, so that way the document looks even when you scan it. You don't see like the shadow of your body or like a plant or something else in the room casting over that document. It also should just help take better scans of your document as well. The microphone array was also redesigned with improvements to the wide spectrum and voice isolation features, along with a new algorithm that if you are covering one of the mics with your hand, it'll actually use the other mics to it'll boost those so it still picks up your voice nice and clean and it's not like cutting off and sounding muffled. For the first time ever, feature differences aren't related to the size of the iPad. As far as spec sheets go, the 11-inch and the 13-inch iPad get the same features across the board. It's really just the storage options where it differs. So like I mentioned, if you get the 256 or 512 gig option, doesn't matter if it's 11 or 13-inch, you get the 9-core CPU with the 3 performance cores and the 6 efficiency cores, 8 gigs of RAM, and just the standard OLED display. If you get the 1 or 2 terabyte option, you get the 10-core CPU, so the 4 performance cores, 6 efficiency cores, and 16 gigs of RAM, and also the option to upgrade to the nano texture display. I'm really happy to see that the 11-inch iPad Pro is being treated as equal. I've heard from a lot of people that really wanted that 11-inch size, but they didn't like the fact that it didn't get the mini LED display or something else along the lines throughout the years. But this does kind of make the 1 and 2 terabyte option of the iPad Pro almost like the iPad Pro Pros or iPad Ultras, something like that. It is a little weird. It does add a little bit of weirdness to the iPad lineup, but I mean, the Mac's been doing it for years, so why not the iPad as well? Now, what you won't hear me review in this video is iPadOS. iPadOS is updated and released separately from, iPad hardware updates. We should be seeing iPadOS 18 next month in June at WWDC. I'm hoping for a big year, but we don't know what it's going to be yet. And honestly, never buy a product with the hopes of, a future software update or even the promise of a future software update. Of course, I'll be covering iPadOS 18 and all that stuff here on the channel, but for right now, I'm just sticking to covering the hardware and what's new on these devices. But speaking of what's new and what was released with these devices, let's talk about some accessories. Ooh, I love iPad accessories. We're going to start by talking about the Apple Pencil Pro. This may look just like the second generation Apple Pencil or even the Apple Pencil with USB-C, but this is a completely redesigned Apple Pencil. First, there are haptics built into the pencil now. You can press and squeeze just a bit to get a haptic button. And the haptics in the Apple Pencil Pro feel amazing. It actually feels like you're clicking a button. By default, when squeezing this will launch a new tool selection kit. This will launch wherever the pencil tip is. You can quickly select a tool, make a change to that tool, or select a color. There's a really cool undo menu in here where you can step back and select through a menu of different options of specific changes you have made to your document. I love this. The squeeze gesture can be reprogrammed to do different things in Settings, Pencil, including jumping between tools, color palettes, and ink attributes. You can turn it off completely, or you can run a shortcut. So excited. I need to spend some time. I need to sit down and think of a cool shortcut. I run a run from a button on the Apple Pencil, but this is a hardware button for running a shortcut. Now, double tap on the Apple Pencil Pro is still a thing as well. In fact, you actually get haptic feedback now when doing double tap. You can go into Settings, Pencil, and program double tap to do something completely different than the squeeze gestures. So that way you have two different buttons on the Apple Pencil Pro. Now, when using the Apple Pencil Pro, there's this drop shadow that will appear when using it. Now, I don't know if this is going to show up on video very well. It's very light, but what's kind of cool about this is it's mimicking a shadow like if you were using an actual pencil and piece of paper, but you can see where the tip is going to go exactly. There's also a new feature called Barrel Roll. What this does is it allows you to rotate the physical pencil and in turn rotate the digital tool you are using. This is going to be big for artists. So in apps like Freeform or Procreate, you can get the brushstroke at the right angle without having to rotate the iPad or your body. This takes advantage of a new gyroscope that is in the Apple Pencil Pro to do this. The Apple Pencil Pro also has support for Find My. Now, this is the nearby option of Find My, so it's kind of like the hot and cold game. It's not the precise one like with the AirTags, but it is still really nice that it has it. Of course, the Apple Pencil Pro still stores and charges magnetically. If you look at the Face ID sensor in the front-facing camera, you can see they are spaced out to make way for where the Apple Pencil charges and mounts, which was obviously redesigned to make way for that whole array up there, which is the big reason why the Apple Pencil 2 does not work with this iPad Pro. There just wouldn't be a place for it to mount and charge. But every iPad in the lineup now supports two Apple Pencils. For this particular iPad Pro, it's the Apple Pencil Pro and the USB-C Apple Pencil. With the iPad and Apple Pencil lineup, you basically decide what features you want or what price point you want. There's a more affordable option, and then there's a more full-featured, a little more expensive option. There's really not a huge price difference between any of the Apple Pencils, especially when you consider how pricey the iPad Pros can get. Because I'm not an artist, if I wasn't doing this YouTube channel where I talk about features of the iPad, I would probably just go with the USB-C Apple Pencil. There is also a new Magic Keyboard. I'm so excited for this. The inside bottom portion of it is completely aluminum now, while the outside is still that same rubbery material. I'm happy with this change. The rubbery material started to wear really quickly with the old Magic Keyboard. Plus, the aluminum just feels better to type on. The new 13-inch Magic Keyboard weighs about 667 grams, while the old one weighed 716 grams. Not a massive difference, but when you factor in that the iPad Pro weighs less now, it's a noticeable difference. So combined, the iPad Pro and the Magic Keyboard is 1,249 grams, or about 2.75 pounds, which is about the same as a MacBook Air. A nice addition to this keyboard is there's now a function row. I was never upset about the last keyboard that didn't have one, but now that it's here, I wouldn't trade it away. There's built-in screen brightness controls, a multitasking button, spotlight search, a dictation button, but an interesting little tidbit, if you long press the dictation button, it will trigger Siri, do not disturb. Unfortunately, you can't program this to trigger other focus modes though. Media playback controls, including play, pause, skip, and go back, volume controls, including mute, and a lock screen button. There's also an escape key. So Vim coming to the iPad confirmed. I'm kidding, that's a programmer joke. I highly doubt it. But it is a handy key to have. There are a few apps out there that take advantage of it. On keyboards that don't have an escape key, you can hit Command period in order to simulate that. The trackpad on the Magic Keyboard also got overhauled as well. It's now bigger. Talk about a hallelujah! It feels so much nicer to have that extra space, especially when dragging and dropping content. It's also haptic now, like MacBooks and Magic Keyboard. This means it doesn't actually move. It's a solid piece of glass, but the haptic engine simulates that movement. This is another big plus for me. The old keyboard, that trackpad did click, like physically click, and it was so loud. You also had to click at the bottom. You couldn't click up top. You had to click just in the right spot on the old one. Now with this new one, it's extremely quiet and you can click wherever you want. The key switches are the same as the previous Magic Keyboard, 1mm scissor switches. They feel the same, which is fine. It's no fancy mechanical keyboard with custom switches that are hand lubed and, added foam padding to get that precise sound and feel. But, I'll take what I can get. It's a similar layout and design. It still has that cantilever design, which makes it really nice to be typing away and then just reach up on the screen to tap on something. I will fully admit I wanted something a little more laptop-like. I thought that would give me the extra space for a function row and a bigger trackpad, but Apple was actually able to figure out a way to include that stuff and still keep that cantilever design. And because of the weight changes, Apple was actually able to make the iPad portion of the Magic Keyboard go back further. So you get more viewing angles to pick from. It can go back even further. It's not nearly as much as like something like a MacBook, but when compared to the previous Magic Keyboard, it's a very noticeable difference and a very welcome change. The pass-through charging now does around 29 watts of charging. The previous Magic Keyboard did around 21 watts. For the record, the Thunderbolt port on the iPad Pro does around 36 watts of charging. It is a little wild that in 2024, the iPad Pros are still stuck in like the 30 watt charging range, that they haven't even gone up to like 60. I would appreciate that because charging an iPad faster would be really helpful. The USB-C port on the Magic Keyboard is still just for charging. There is no data pass-through, which is also kind of a bummer. This new Magic Keyboard is just for the new iPad Pros. Because these iPad Pros are thinner, lighter, this Magic Keyboard is designed and fitted for these iPad Pros. The other ones just physically won't fit in here because of this new design. Now, because the internals did get redesigned, again, the internals had to be redesigned so we could get the OLED display, better cooling, M4 chip, things like that. Because of that, the magnets got shifted around. So it won't work with the old Magic Keyboard. It won't even attach to it because the magnets aren't lined up. But this also means like third-party magnetic stands I have, like the MagFloat Pro, don't work at all. The Infinity Adjust iPad stand kind of works if you off-center it a bit, but it makes me really nervous and I wouldn't want to use it like that. Now, the last accessory I want to cover is the magnetic Folio cover. On the outside, it doesn't look much different, but there is now a total of 4 viewing angles compared to the 2 angles of its predecessor. 3 of them are when the iPad is standing up. Just adjust the back flap and it will magnetically attach to each one of these. Then there is the classic angle for the laying down mode that has been around since the original iPad. It's a really nice touch that they added these extra viewing angles. Overall, since the iPad Pro is my computer, the place I work, I'm really happy with this update. It gave me some stuff I'm really excited to use, like the OLED display and the M4 chip. Of course, there's stuff missing that I really wanted, like extra ports or better battery life. But I do feel this iPad gives me more than the last couple of updates. So that's it for the new iPad Pros. I want to hear from you all what you think about the new iPad Pros. Let me know in the comments below. I, of course, am going to be covering a bunch of iPad stuff on the channel, especially running up to WWDC. I will have an iPad Air review coming out soon as well, so be sure to subscribe if you aren't already. My thanks to Paperlike for sponsoring this video. If you liked the video, hit the thumbs up button, subscribe if you haven't already, and have a great day.